The neighborhood I live in isn't exactly what you'd call peaceful. On paper, it looks perfect. Rows of neatly built homes, trimmed hedges, shiny sidewalks, and a homeowners association that loves to boast about how exclusive our community is. But anyone who's lived under an HOA knows that appearances are just smoke and mirrors. Behind the fake smiles and manicured lawns are endless arguments about fence heights, mailbox colors, and whether your trash can is visible for more than 3 minutes after the garbage truck leaves. And at the center of it all, Karen. Now, Karen wasn't just any HOA board member. She was the kind of woman who treated the bylaws like they were sacred scripture. She roamed the neighborhood like a self-appointed sheriff, clipboard in hand, snapping photos of cracked sidewalks, faded shutters, or even blades of grass that had the audacity to grow half an inch too tall. She was the kind of person who didn't just enforce the rules, she invented new ones whenever she felt like it. So, naturally, when something unusual showed up in my driveway, she was bound to take notice. That something unusual was a Jeep. But not just any Jeep. This one wasn't even mine. Here's the backstory. I'd agreed to let some federal investigators use my driveway while they were running an operation in the area. Long story short, I had a friend who worked for a certain 3-letter agency, and they needed an inconspicuous parking spot in a neighborhood like mine, someplace where a government vehicle wouldn't stand out. My wide driveway happened to be the perfect cover. So, one morning, without any explanation to the neighbors, a black Jeep appeared in my driveway. It looked ordinary enough, but to the trained eye, there were subtle giveaways. Reinforced bumpers. An antenna setup that didn't quite match. Windows tinted a shade darker than what was legal in our state. To anyone who knew what to look for, it screamed government issue. But Karen wasn't the type to notice that. No, to her, the problem was much simpler. Someone had dared to park a vehicle in her neighborhood without clearing it through her. I first noticed her reaction when I saw her pacing back and forth across the street, arms crossed, lips pursed so tightly that her whole face seemed to scrunch inward. She was staring at the Jeep like it was a trespasser, an invader that had dared to violate her sacred HOA guidelines. The funny part? She thought it was my Jeep. Now, I drive a plain old pickup truck, nothing flashy, nothing special. But apparently, in Karen's mind, I had gone out and purchased a rugged off-road vehicle that didn't fit the aesthetic standards of our community. Never mind that our bylaws said absolutely nothing about what kind of car you could drive, as long as it wasn't rusted-out junk. In her mind, this Jeep was unapproved. And Karen wasn't the type to sit quietly and stew about it. The first knock on my door came that afternoon. It wasn't a polite knock, either. It was the kind of pounding that screamed authority, like a cop demanding you open up. I sighed, already knowing who it was before I even checked the peephole. Sure enough, there she was. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, eyes burning with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver justice. I opened the door slowly. Afternoon, Karen. She didn't even waste time with greetings. That Jeep, she barked, jabbing her pen toward my driveway, is not allowed in this neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, not allowed? She flipped through her clipboard, as though somewhere in those pages she'd find proof that my crime was real. It doesn't fit the guidelines. It's too aggressive looking. This community has an image to maintain, and that vehicle doesn't reflect it. I almost laughed. Karen, it's just a Jeep. Plenty of people drive them. Her face reddened. Not in this neighborhood. We're supposed to have clean, uniform vehicles. Family cars. Sedans. SUVs at most. But a Jeep? With off-road tires. What are you planning, taking it mudding in the front yard? I resisted the urge to smirk. If only she knew. Look, I said, keeping my voice calm, that Jeep isn't even mine. So you don't need to worry about it. That made her blink. She wasn't expecting that. Not yours. Then whose is it? I shrugged casually. A friend's. They needed a place to park for a while. That answer clearly wasn't good enough. I could see the gears turning in her head. She wanted names, details, maybe even a blood sample. But I wasn't about to give her anything. Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was unveiling a scandal. Do you even realize what people are saying? A strange vehicle suddenly shows up in your driveway, and no one knows who it belongs to. This is a safety issue. For all we know, it could be connected to criminal activity. I couldn't help but grin at the irony. If only she had any clue about who really owned that Jeep. But instead of explaining, I simply said, "It's not a problem, Karen. Trust me." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't like being dismissed. If that vehicle is still here tomorrow, I'll be forced to escalate this matter. The HOA has rules, and I will enforce them. With that, she spun on her heel and marched off, heels clicking on the pavement like a gavel striking judgment. I closed the door behind me, chuckling softly. I knew exactly how this was going to play out, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, I opened my curtains and immediately spotted her. Karen was back, pacing along the sidewalk with her phone pressed to her ear. She kept sneaking glances at the Jeep, whispering furiously into the receiver, as though she were coordinating a sting operation of her own. She didn't realize the irony. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and watched the show unfold. A few minutes later, 2 more HOA board members strolled up the street, summoned by Karen's call. They stood beside her, nodding gravely as she waved her arms and pointed repeatedly at my driveway. I couldn't hear every word, but snippets floated through the open window. Dangerous-looking vehicle. Could be gang-related. Setting a bad precedent for the neighborhood. I nearly spit out my coffee. Gang-related. Because of a Jeep. Karen's imagination was working overtime. By mid-afternoon, she was back at my door. This time, she wasn't alone. She had dragged along Martin, the HOA president, a balding man with a permanent frown and a tie that looked 2 sizes too tight. Unlike Karen, he usually preferred to keep the peace, but even he looked like he'd been worn down by her relentless badgering. When I answered, Karen launched into her speech without waiting for pleasantries. "Sir, we've had multiple complaints about the vehicle parked in your driveway. It's intimidating the neighbors, and it violates the spirit of our HOA standards." "The spirit?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "So now you're enforcing unwritten rules?" Karen puffed up like a peacock. "Don't play coy. This community has expectations. That Jeep is..." Martin cut her off with a weary sigh. "Look, we just need to know if it's yours. If it is, then we'll discuss options. If it isn't, then please let the owner know it can't stay here long term." I leaned casually against the door frame. Like I told Karen yesterday, it's not mine. And it's not here long term. So relax. Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. "Who does it belong to, then?" I smiled. "A friend." Her lips curled. "What kind of friend?" "Some shady character, who doesn't want to show their face." "You realize people are worried, right? This neighborhood isn't the place for..." "Karen," I interrupted, keeping my tone light but firm. "It's under control." Her face turned crimson. She hated being dismissed, hated not getting answers. Martin tugged at his tie, clearly eager to wrap things up. "Just make sure it's gone soon, okay?" We'll have to take action otherwise. I nodded politely. Got it. They walked off, but I could tell this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to drop a bone once she'd bitten down. And I was right. That evening, as I stepped out to grab the mail, I noticed her crouched near the Jeep, pretending to tie her shoe while actually peering into the tinted windows. She tried circling it once, twice, even brushing her hand along the door handle like she might try to open it. I couldn't resist. Careful, Karen, I called. Touching someone else's vehicle is technically trespassing. She jumped like she'd been caught stealing cookies from a jar, then straightened up, face flushed. I was just inspecting. For safety reasons. Right, I said, smirking. Why don't you leave the safety inspections to the professionals? She huffed and stormed off. But I knew she was planning her next move. What I didn't expect was how far she'd actually go. The following day, I woke up to the sound of voices outside. Curious, I peeked through the blinds, and there it was, a police cruiser parked at the curb, lights flashing silently. 2 uniformed officers were speaking with Karen, who was gesturing wildly toward the Jeep like she'd just uncovered a drug cartel. My stomach tightened for a moment, then quickly relaxed. If Karen thought she was about to win, she was in for the shock of her life. I stepped outside calmly, coffee mug in hand. Morning, officers. What seems to be the problem? Karen spun around, triumph blazing in her eyes. Finally. I reported this suspicious vehicle, and now it's going to be dealt with. Tell him he can't just harbor dangerous cars in our neighborhood. The taller officer turned to me. Sir, is that vehicle yours? Nope, I said easily. Doesn't belong to me. Karen let out a loud scoff. That's what he says. But no one knows who it belongs to. He refuses to explain. I think it's criminal. Maybe stolen. Maybe part of some gang operation. Just look at it. The officer frowned, clearly annoyed by her dramatics. Calm down. We'll check the plates. Karen folded her arms, smug as ever. She thought she'd finally trapped me. But when the officer ran the tags, his entire demeanor changed. He glanced at his partner, then both of them stood a little straighter. Sir, the tall officer asked carefully, are you aware of who this vehicle is registered to? I smiled faintly. Yes. I am. Karen, confused by their sudden shift, stepped forward. Well? What did you find? Is it stolen? The officer shot her a sharp look. That's classified information. You don't need to worry about it. Her jaw dropped. Classified? What does that mean? Tell me. But the officer ignored her completely. He turned back to me, lowered his voice and said, we're good here. Sorry for the disturbance. Karen practically exploded. What do you mean, we're good? That thing is dangerous. Who owns it? The officer fixed her with a cold, professional stare. For your own sake, I'd suggest you stop asking questions. And just like that, the tables had turned. Karen stood frozen, mouth hanging open, as the officers got back in their cruiser and drove away. I raised my coffee cup in her direction and said, see? Nothing to worry about. The look on her face was priceless. But deep down, I knew she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. If I thought the visit from the police would shut Karen down, I was dead wrong. For most people, being warned off by law enforcement would be enough to take a step back. Not Karen. In her mind, the cops' refusal to share information wasn't a red flag that she should leave it alone. It was proof that something bigger was going on. And in her little HOA kingdom, she believed it was her duty to expose it. The very next evening, I saw her hustling from door to door, clipboard clutched tight, whispering urgently to every neighbor she could catch outside. From the bits and pieces I overheard, she was spreading rumors faster than wildfire. According to Karen, the Jeep in my driveway wasn't just suspicious, it was practically a mobile crime lab. She told one family it belonged to drug dealers. She told another it was tied to a biker gang. And to Mrs. Robinson down the street, the most gullible of them all, she whispered that it was probably an unmarked vehicle used by kidnappers. By the end of the night, half the neighborhood was giving me side-eye glances like I was some cartel lieutenant hiding in the suburbs. The cherry on top. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Now, HOA meetings are usually soul-sucking affairs that drag on about paint colors and lawn heights. But this one was different. I only knew because my buddy Jim, one of the few sane board members, gave me a heads up. Dude, he chuckled over the phone, Karen's losing her mind. She called everyone together tonight, just to talk about your Jeep situation. You might want to swing by, it's comedy gold. So I did. When I walked into the community clubhouse, all eyes turned to me. Karen was standing at the front like she was giving a presidential address, pointing to a blown-up photo of the Jeep she'd clearly taken herself. And as you can see, she was saying dramatically, this vehicle has oversized tires, heavily tinted windows, and suspicious equipment attached to it. This is not the type of vehicle our neighborhood allows. For the safety of our children and the integrity of our community, I motioned that it be towed immediately. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. A few neighbors nodded along, clearly caught up in her theatrics. Others looked skeptical, but didn't want to get on her bad side. I raised my hand slowly. Mind if I say something? Karen's eyes narrowed like daggers. Oh, how convenient. The owner himself decides to show up. Not the owner, I corrected smoothly, taking a seat. I've said it before, it isn't mine. That only made her more furious. Stop playing games. You're harboring that thing in your driveway. If it's not yours, who does it belong to? Answer the question for once. I leaned back, calm as ever. That's not something I can share. The room buzzed with whispers. To Karen, my refusal was as good as an admission of guilt. She pounced. See? He won't say. That means it's illegal. I demand the board authorize immediate towing. Before the others could speak, Jim cut in. Karen, you can't just tow someone's car without proof it violates bylaws. The rules say nothing about what type of vehicle a resident or guest can park, as long as it's registered and not abandoned. Karen's face went red. That's a loophole. We need to protect our community from criminal infiltration. That phrase set off a chuckle I couldn't hold back. I muttered under my breath, you have no idea. She whipped her head toward me. What was that? Nothing, I said, smirking. The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors arguing, Karen screeching about danger, Jim rolling his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Eventually, the board voted not to authorize towing, leaving Karen fuming like a kettle about to explode. But I knew she wasn't finished. Later that week, things escalated. It was just past midnight, when I caught movement outside my window. At first, I thought it was a raccoon rifling through trash, but no. It was Karen. There she was, crouching low, creeping across my lawn with a flashlight. She was trying to peer into the Jeep again, snapping photos, even writing something in her little notebook. I slipped outside quietly, walking right up behind her before saying, "Careful, Karen. You might trip sneaking around like that." She let out a shriek, spinning around and dropping her flashlight. You scared me." "Funny," I said. Most people don't prowl their neighbor's property in the middle of the night unless they're up to no good. Her face twisted. I'm not the one hiding suspicious vehicles. I'm collecting evidence for the board. Someone has to do something before it's too late. I sighed. You really don't want to mess with that Jeep. Trust me. She sneered. What are you going to do, call the cops? Go ahead. I already tried that, remember? I didn't answer. Instead, I noticed the faint glow of headlights approaching. Slowly, silently, another SUV pulled up at the curb. Two men in plain clothes stepped out, moving with quiet precision. Karen didn't notice, she was too busy ranting. But I recognized them instantly. The feds. They'd been watching, waiting, and apparently Karen's late-night snooping had finally caught their attention. One of the agents spoke into a mic clipped to his collar. Target spotted. Situation under control. Karen froze when she heard that. Target? What do you mean? The men walked right past me, fixing their gaze on her. You need to step away from the vehicle immediately. Her bravado melted in an instant. I'm on the HOA board. I have authority here. The agent's expression didn't change. Not over this, you don't. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked genuinely rattled. She stammered something about community safety and suspicious activity, but the agents shut her down fast. This vehicle is federal property. Its presence here is part of an ongoing operation. If you interfere again, you could face charges. Do you understand? The color drained from her face. Charges? I couldn't resist grinning. Guess it wasn't gang-related after all, huh? Karen looked like she might faint. The agents escorted her back toward the sidewalk, giving her one last warning to stay out of things. She nodded frantically, clutching her clipboard like a security blanket, before scurrying off into the night. For once, she was speechless. But I knew her silence wouldn't last forever. If anything, this encounter would only fuel her paranoia. And when a woman like Karen feels cornered, she doesn't back down, she doubles down. The real showdown was yet to come. For a few days after her midnight run-in with the federal agents, Karen disappeared from my radar. No knocking on my door. No pacing on the sidewalk. No frantic calls to neighbors. It was almost peaceful. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. Karen wasn't the type to give up, she was the type to reload. And sure enough, her silence was just the calm before the storm. The rumor mill. By the end of the week, whispers were spreading again. At the mailbox, Mrs. Robinson nervously asked if I'd seen the strange men in suits walking around at night. The Wilsons, 2 doors down, were convinced the Jeep was part of a witness protection operation. And Mr. Daniels swore he saw drones hovering over the cul-de-sac at 3 a.m. I knew exactly who was behind these rumors, Karen. Even after being warned by actual federal agents, she couldn't resist spinning the situation into something dramatic. Except now she wasn't just calling it suspicious, she was claiming it was dangerous. According to her, the Jeep wasn't protecting the neighborhood. It was threatening it. The big plan. I found out about her final plan when Jim, my friend on the HOA board, called me again. Buddy, he said, chuckling nervously, Karen's lost her mind. She's organizing some kind of neighborhood inspection tonight. She's rallying people to march up to your place and demand that Jeep be removed. I blinked. She's starting a mob. Pretty much. Says if the board won't act, the community will. I tried shutting it down, but she's in full crusader mode. I sighed. Let her try. I have a feeling it'll resolve itself. The confrontation. That evening, just after sunset, I heard the sound of feet on pavement. I peeked out the window and saw them, Karen leading a group of about a dozen neighbors up the street, flashlights in hand like some kind of suburban militia. Karen was at the front, her clipboard raised like a shield. "Tonight," she declared loudly enough for half the block to hear, "we take back our neighborhood." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. I stepped outside, leaning casually against my porch railing as they approached. "Evening, everyone. What's the occasion?" Karen jabbed her pen toward the Jeep. "We're here to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. That vehicle is a threat, and we demand it be removed immediately." A few of the neighbors muttered in agreement, though most looked uncomfortable, like they'd been pressured into showing up. I shrugged. "Not my call. You'll have to take it up with the owners." Karen sneered. "Then tell us who owns it. Stop hiding behind excuses." Before I could reply, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A black SUV rolled up slowly, stopping right behind the Jeep. Two federal agents stepped out, the same ones Karen had encountered before. The crowd fell silent. The taller agent scanned the group, then spoke in a firm voice. "What's going on here?" Karen, oblivious to the hole she was digging, puffed out her chest. "We're exercising our community rights. That vehicle doesn't belong, and we're demanding it be removed." The agent's jaw tightened. We already told you once, this is federal property. Its presence here is part of an active operation. You and your neighbors need to disperse immediately." Karen stomped her foot. "You can't just park secret government vehicles in our neighborhood without permission. We have rules." The agent stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the threat clear. "The only rules that apply here are federal ones. And if you interfere again, you won't just get a warning. You'll get charges." A hush fell over the crowd. Neighbors shuffled nervously, exchanging glances. Most of them clearly wanted no part of this anymore. But Karen, oh no, Karen couldn't stop. "This is outrageous," she screeched. "We have rights. You can't just." The second agent cut her off. Last warning. Go home. Now." For the first time all night, Karen faltered. Her face twisted, her words stuck in her throat. Finally, she spun around and barked at the neighbors, "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when something happens." The crowd broke apart quickly after that, scattering back to their homes like kids caught past curfew. Karen stomped off, fuming, but noticeably quieter than usual. The fallout. The next morning, the Jeep was gone. Just like that. No explanation, no fanfare, its mission was complete. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation. Some said it had been undercover police. Others claimed it was a government surveillance unit. A few whispered that it had been there to protect me from some unknown threat. I didn't bother correcting anyone. Let them guess. As for Karen, her credibility took a massive hit. After leading a failed neighborhood uprising and being dressed down by federal agents twice, she was suddenly the butt of every joke. People started rolling their eyes whenever she launched into a new crusade. Even the board grew tired of her antics. By the end of the month, she'd resigned her position on the HOA for personal reasons. My last word. One evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, I saw Karen standing by her mailbox. She gave me the nastiest glare I'd ever seen, her face tight with humiliation and resentment. I rolled down my window, smiled, and said, "Told you not to mess with that Jeep." Her face went red, and she stormed inside without a word. And just like that, the reign of HOA Karen was over.